Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to the third session of our 18-day program, 18 days, 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So today's chapter is going to be called Karma Yoga. However, before we begin, um, let's recite the pranam mantras together. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vancha Kalpadarubhyas Chakrapa Sandubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyata Deshatarani Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gauravakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate giram Yatkripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinakarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishvaram. So just a review of what we covered yesterday, but I'm also going to go back to chapter 2 today a little bit so that I can help connect the dots between chapter 2 and chapter 3. So we looked at the acronym of Gita for chapter 2 yesterday, and Gita, with the G being Guru, I being identity, the T is the two dharmas, and A is Ananda. And we said that the preconditions for surrender is one's own eagerness to hear more, one's humility, after having understood that one cannot really find all the answers to the questions that we have, forces us to approach an exalted personality who's well versed in the scriptures and who can provide us the answers that we need so that we can lead a better life. We can elevate our consciousness. So it requires courage to acknowledge one's weakness, and without humility, one really cannot seek answers. Pride does not allow you to ask questions. Pride does not allow you to accept new information. Pride does not allow you to surrender. It may be easy for us to surrender to the Lord than to another human being. So if we have faith in the Lord, we'd rather continue to pursue a relationship with the Lord. But at the same time, we may not have faith in another human being, especially in Kali Yuga, given the fact that everything that we see around us is just so beset with corruption. Yesterday, we were talking about how do you know which institution to follow? Because There are so many institutions that claim to be based on the scriptures, especially in India. It's hard not to get confused about so many options that we have. Are all those options that are available to us, are they all equally legitimate? And we have to ask ourselves that question. There are some very well-known institutions today, along with ISKCON. Are they going to give you what you really need? And the most fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves is, what do we really need in our life? So in today's chapter, Krishna is going to talk about the importance of learning to control one's mind. But there is a specific connection between chapter 2 and chapter 3. So I want to articulate why is it that chapter 3 begins with Arjuna asking one more question. Actually, even in chapter 2, Arjuna has asked questions. We'll come to that in a minute. But chapter 2 is so lengthy, it's very difficult to cover chapter 2 in a 1 hour or 1.5 hour session. So we only covered at a very high level chapter 2. So we talked about the identity, the fact that all of us have a physical body, we have a subtle body, and we have what's called the soul in its pure state. And Krishna talks about the difference between the body and the soul, emphasizing the various characteristics of the soul to convince Arjuna that when one makes a decision, one should also take into account the soul. So Krishna talks about reincarnation, how the body undergoes changes. So it should be no surprise that when the body becomes useless to the soul is simply going to go and occupy a new body. And that Arjuna should not be disturbed by such a fact. We also discussed how Lord Krishna chastises Arjuna. You know, the word guru, one of the meanings of the word guru, means heavy. The planet Guru, Jupiter, is supposed to be a very heavy planet. Heavy means chastisement, scolding, putting you in your place. That's the role of a guru. The role of a guru is to shine a mirror in your face and let you know that you may be thinking higher of yourself than you really are. So we cannot fool our own guru. They can see right through you. So Arjuna experiences that heavy hand of Lord Krishna, where Krishna is telling him, you're speaking like a Brahmana, but you're not one. You're talking nonsense because you've lost sight of who you really are. You've lost your sense of identity. And that the way Arjuna is talking, he's going to suffer the consequences of that because his reputation is going to be besmirched, because nobody is going to look at him as being brave as a result of walking away from the battlefield. No warrior gets honored in society for walking away from the battlefield. So his reputation is going to go for a toss. So Krishna is warning him, don't speak like this. It's very unbecoming of you, Krishna says. So after Krishna has established his identity for him, then Krishna dwells on the fact that there are different types of duties that we all have. We have a duty towards the body and we have a duty towards the soul, both of which should be taken into deep consideration when one makes a decision. but one should never neglect the duties of the soul. And then Krishna does a comparative analysis of tastes, that we will always have desires. Desires are not going to disappear. But what we can do is we can substitute desires that create problems for us with desires that are going to actually elevate our consciousness and lead us to liberation from fear and lamentation. So anybody who's tried to kick a bad habit understands that it is so difficult to kick a bad habit, whether it is smoking or drinking or addiction to watching endless amount of TV or YouTube videos or Facebook. We spend quite a bit of time in the digital space, and before we know it, we have consumed quite a bit of time doing something that's totally useless. Some of us, maybe not all of us. So how do we break free of that habit? A lot of us have the habit of taking the phone with us when we go to sleep. The first thing that we do when we wake up is to turn on our phone to see what notifications we've received. We feel so lost without our phone. These are all very bad habits that's going to interfere with our ability to elevate our consciousness. So desires are going to flow incessantly, Krishna says. Two things: we should withdraw like a tortoise, limbs back into the shell and be protected under the layers that we develop of higher consciousness. We also talked about how Krishna describes to Arjuna how one actually gets attracted to different objects that take us away from Krishna. So we talked about lust and anger yesterday, bewilderment, illusion, and then loss of discrimination, which leads to various problems in society like rape and murder and robbery, corruption, etc. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the 6 problems for us: Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya. Kama is lust. Lust, as Shastra describes, any deep longing desire that we have. And it could be for anything. Krodha is anger. Lobha is greed. If your lust is satisfied, your lust only is going to keep increasing, and it leads to greed. And when greed and anger are all mixed up, sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not successful in fulfilling your desires, it leads to delusion. You begin to think you are in control. That is moha. Mada is pride. And matsarya is jealousy or envy. You can never have enough. If your neighbor has something, you want it. That kind of envy also drives people. So Krishna uses the analogy that desires will keep flowing like rivers into an ocean. We should be like an ocean, calm, not breach the boundaries. We should not respond and react to every desire that comes our way. So Krishna is advising Arjuna that he cannot run away from his responsibilities, no matter how uncomfortable the situation may be for Arjuna, the circumstance. So Arjuna says, Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. I am now surrendering to you. I want you to instruct me. Guru means you're ready to listen, you're ready to learn, you're ready to apply. Listen, learn, apply. And Shastras also say, when you're attending a spiritual discourse and you ask questions after the class, there are three beneficiaries when one asks questions. The person asking the question is benefited. The preacher responding to the question is also benefited. And most importantly, all those who are in that satsang, if they are listening attentively, they also benefit. So there are three beneficiaries to any one person asking a question and seeking clarification after satsang. So in the second chapter, Krishna is actually criticizing those who are not focused on the higher ideals and those who are distracted by baser desires and instincts, which means those who are chasing money, fame, 10,000 degrees. Some people are attracted to accumulating a lot of degrees. So Krishna is critiquing and saying, yes, this is necessary for you to survive, to take care of yourself on a bodily platform, but he's criticizing those who are not focused on higher ideals. Krishna also briefly criticizes those who are following the Vedic scriptures just to satisfy their desires. In the Vedic scriptures, there are a lot of yajnas that one can perform to achieve certain outcomes. Krishna says there are these people who are so attracted to the Vedic scriptures and what it promises from material success standpoint, that they are fools because they have forgotten the higher ideal. When we talked about Krishna defeating the 5 different arguments that Arjuna puts forth, one such defeat is the fact the very purpose of the Vedas is to discover who's the Supreme Lord and discover one's relationship with him. The purpose of the Vedic scriptures is to re-establish one's relationship with Krishna. So those who are not at all interested in re-establishing their relationship with Krishna, Krishna criticizes such people. He calls them harsh words like fools, moodhas. They've lost their intelligence, Krishna says, because they're so absorbed in materialistic things. So essentially, those who use religion to enjoy basic pleasures, Krishna says they lack wisdom. They are not very smart. They are not very intelligent. Materially, they may be very intelligent. Spiritually, Krishna says they are dumb. They are fools. So I'm going to take you to the second chapter, and I want to cover a few shlokas or the trajectory of the shlokas, and then connect it to chapter 3. As I said, chapter 2 is quite lengthy. It's very difficult to cover all these very important shlokas in a short. So I'm going to come to shlokas in the 40s. So Krishna is talking about the soul in detail. Krishna is talking about the benefits of fighting. So here's Krishna telling Arjuna, O son of Kunti, Either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. So, which means if you lose, you win. If you win, you win. This is that profit and loss calculation that Krishna is giving Arjuna. If you die, you win. If you're victorious, you win. So either which way, you have won. So don't worry, you have to get up and fight. Then he says, well, if you're not interested in this profit and loss calculation, in the very next shloka, Krishna is saying, if you're not interested in, because Arjuna has said, I'm not interested in material wealth. Even if I become as wealthy and have the kind of clout that the demigods have, I'm not interested. So Krishna addresses even that argument. He says, okay, let us say you're not interested in the wealth, you're not interested in the kingdom, but nevertheless you are a Kshatriya. So Krishna says, do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you shall never incur sin. So Krishna is emphasizing here that avoiding one's duty and responsibility is not an option. If you avoid your duty and responsibility, you are going to incur sin. So when Arjuna says, I'm going to commit so many sins by killing all these people, Krishna says, well, actually, the greatest sin you will commit is by not fighting. But there is no sin for fighting because you're fighting under my instructions. You may kill, but actually you are not the person who's killing. Death brings an end to a person's sinful activities, even if that person is your loved one. So Krishna says, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. So this working without fruitive results is Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is Krishna is saying, do your duty, even if you don't want that particular outcome or result. You should be attached to doing your duty. And you can be detached from the results. That's very nice. When you do Nishkama Karma Yoga, there is no bondage for you. Right. Then Krishna briefly talks about Bhakti Yoga here, or Buddhi Yoga. In this endeavor, which means even a little bit, if you do the right thing, it's going to protect you in the future. So doing the right thing is very important for us. Right. Then, here's where Krishna is criticizing those who are attracted to the Vedic scriptures just for the purposes of extracting material benefits. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. So Krishna is saying, that's okay. I am the origin of all the Vedic scriptures, Krishna says. But I didn't create the Vedas so that you can just be mindlessly absorbed in material benefits. Just 1 second, I need to take care of something here. Because if you do something on your phone, it puts a scratch on the screen. So just give me a second. So I'm going to re-share. So Krishna is saying such kind of people, they are quite foolish. And what does Krishna say? They become bewildered, they become trapped. And because they are so absorbed in material things, okay, 1 second. Because they are so absorbed in material things, they will never develop love for God. Because they are too in love with material things. So where is there room to develop love for God? Where is there room to develop bhakti? Krishna himself is saying there is no room for them to develop bhakti. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to perform his duty and not worry about consequences, because consequences is not in our hands. So this is the shloka that's going to connect us to chapter 3. So after saying all of this, Krishna is saying, keep all abominable activities far distant by performing devotional service. And in that consciousness, surrender unto the Lord. And Krishna says, those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers or kripanas. So Krishna is repeatedly criticizing those who are just chasing things. So he's encouraging Arjuna, you practice a little bit of bhakti, surrender to me. Don't be absorbed in wealth and fame and intelligence and what are other things. In the next shloka, Krishna is talking about the benefit of doing bhakti. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions. So today we're going to talk about karma. And I will explain that with an analogy. Even in this life, Krishna is saying you can put a stop to your karma. Therefore, he says, you perform bhakti yoga. And then he gives examples of how great rishis have succeeded by and have gotten liberated by practicing bhakti or buddhi yoga. In this way, they became free from the cycle of birth and death. So after saying all of this, Arjuna asks a question. Okay, you're talking about all these exalted people in the past who have succeeded, who've got liberation. Can you tell me a little bit more about how do they speak, how do they walk, how do they sit? So he's asking Krishna to describe those great exalted personalities who've achieved liberation. In that process, Krishna has said, such great souls have given up desires for sense gratification. They have purified their mind. They have focused on their self. They've elevated their consciousness. And they've overcome all these miseries. So now Arjuna is puzzled. Okay, if you're saying these are good examples for me to follow, then why is it a problem if I give up this fight and go into the forest? What's the problem with that? Why can't I follow in the footsteps of the sages? Why can I not give up this battle, go to the forest and give up the kingdom? Again, a very intelligent question from Arjuna. Because he's listening attentively to Krishna and he's creating little doubts for him as he's listening to what Krishna is saying. So Krishna is saying great sages have done this in the past. So Arjuna is thinking, well, why can't I become a sage? That's his question. So that is going to take us to chapter 3. So Arjuna is a little bit confused. On the one hand, Krishna is saying perform bhakti yoga. On the other hand, Krishna is saying, no, 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 get up and fight. So I'm a little bit confused, Krishna. So chapter 3 is titled Karma Yoga. In this chapter, we're going to learn about what are our duties and responsibilities and how Krishna is going to use examples to tell us how we should be focused on duties and responsibilities. So Arjuna asks a question. So that's how chapter 3 begins. O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? So Krishna has talked about Buddhi Yoga, using your intelligence to discriminate and do the right thing. Arjuna is asking, why can't I use my intelligence and do the right thing and not cause all of this calamity that is about to unfold? So he's asking Krishna, why do you want me to fight? You are just telling me that great sages have used their intelligence, practiced Jnana Yoga and achieved liberation. Why can't I do the same thing? Well, in response to this question, the Lord will speak furthermore. So in the second shloka, Arjuna is asking, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Equivocal means what seems to be conflicting. Therefore, tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Should I practice Jnana Yoga? Or should I be engaged in Karma Kanda activity or Karma Yoga? Which is better? Because you have spoken about all yogas in chapter 2. Why can't I decide which yoga I want to perform? In our scriptures, if you want to take sannyas, and or if you want to practice Jnana Yoga means focusing on the scriptures, study of the scriptures. The precondition for that is you have to purify your heart. To purify your heart, you have to undertake certain austerities. So Krishna is very gently going to tell Arjuna, you are not ready to practice Jnana Yoga because you're not qualified to practice Jnana Yoga. You are not qualified to become a sannyasi. You can't just change your robes and think you've become a sannyasi. You can't just one day decide, okay, today I will study the scriptures, I'm gone. No, there is some amount of preparation work that needs to happen before you make these decisions. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, my recommendation to you, if you want to listen to my advice, don't worry about Jnana Yoga, you're not ready for it. You practice Karma Yoga instead. Because if you're attached to results and outcomes, and you're saying, well, I can't enjoy if I kill my family, what's the point of all of this? That means you're still focused on outcome. So in this chapter, Krishna will go through the yoga ladder. And we are going to understand today what is this yoga ladder. And Krishna is going to advise Arjuna, practice Karma Yoga. Jnana Yoga, you're not ready for it. So it's better to perform your duty imperfectly, Krishna says, than to pretend to be something that you're not. Don't pretend to be a Brahmana or a sannyasi. Externally, you may fool others, but internally, your consciousness has not prepared to do this. So Arjuna is not inclined to kill his relatives. And Krishna has spoken about the difference between the body and the soul. Krishna said that sinful people, the only way to bring an end to their sin sometimes is through death. And by death, they get a new chance. They get a fresh opportunity to start all over. In their next life, maybe they can stop this sinful tendency. So Arjuna is thinking, that's fine. I understand the difference between the body and the soul. I understand these people on the other side are sinful. Some of them are very sinful. But why should I worry about that? Why can't I worry only about myself? Why should I worry about others? Let them do their thing. So in this chapter, in chapter 3, although Arjuna is justifying why he should not fight, Krishna will elevate his consciousness to a slightly higher level now by telling him there is a root cause of why they are committing these sinful acts. And we need to uproot that sinful tendency itself. And a new birth can give them a new opportunity to uproot that sinful tendency. So essentially, Krishna is telling Arjuna, even if you want to forgive them for their sins, your forgiveness is shallow. It's not real forgiveness. Because they will continue this tendency. You may be compassionate, you may want to forgive them, but that has not put an end to their sinful tendencies. So Krishna is going to, in this chapter, talk about lust being the root cause of all of our sinful activities. How this is our number one enemy. So we'll come into the slides now. So this chapter is titled Karma Yoga. Before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So Arjuna has asked a question on renunciation. Why can't I renounce? Why are you forcing me to work? If the work is not tasteful for me, why can't I give up that work? So we're going to understand there are two types of renunciations. What's the difference between those two renunciations? Krishna is going to explain. There is false renunciation and there is true renunciation. And essentially, Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are engaged in false renunciation. You are not fooling me. And Krishna says it's better you learn how to regulate your mind, your senses, your intelligence. If you're confused, this is what you should practice. Then Krishna says, after you have followed duties and responsibilities, you can elevate to become an exemplary leader. And after that, Arjuna will ask a question about, even if I want to do the right thing sometimes, why is it that I do the wrong thing? Even though I already know that what I'm about to do is going to get me into trouble. So Arjuna asks that question of Krishna. Why is it sometimes we know what is the right thing to do, we know what is wrong, but still, it's like somebody is forcing us to do something even though we know it is just flat out wrong. It's not good for us. And Krishna will respond to that question. So today's acronym is TREE. If you recall, the single word summary for chapter 1 was lamentation. The single word summary for chapter 2 is identity. Krishna has established Arjuna's identity to be on the spiritual platform. The single word summary for today's chapter is duty. Duty. What are our duties and responsibilities? Prescribed duties and responsibilities, not any duty and responsibility. So how to exhibit exemplary conduct? So Krishna is going to say, Arjuna, you're in a position of leadership. Anything and everything that you do, people are observing and they will follow you. And because you're in a position of leadership, You have to be very careful about how you conduct yourself. And he said, and then Krishna will give examples of whom he should follow. And then Arjuna asks the question about why do we do things even though we know it's not beneficial for us? And in response to that, Krishna says that's because of lust. And lust is your single biggest enemy. Lust here means any desire for anything material. And anytime Krishna identifies a problem, he'll also follow it up with a solution. So he will tell Arjuna how to conquer lust. So the topic is Tyaga, renunciation. There is what is called Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. Falgu Vairagya means you are pretending to be someone that you're not. We were talking yesterday, there are a lot of gurus out there. They may not be bona fide gurus. Externally, they are wearing the garb of a guru. They may be in saffron cloth. But are they genuinely a leader? Are they genuinely a guru? Are they genuinely a renunciate? So, for example, Arjuna may be ready to go to the forest because he thinks he's ready to give up all things material. He's not interested in the kingdom. He's not interested in wealth. He's not interested in success. He's not interested in anything. But if he's not practiced renunciation, he's going to go to the forest and do the exact same thing. His mind and senses is going to be distracted by all kinds of things in the forest. So just because you go into the forest and you have a change of scenario or change in scenery doesn't mean you become a better person all of a sudden. It doesn't work that way. Because what are you taking with you? You're taking your consciousness with you. You're taking your mind with you. You're taking your intelligence with you. If all of this is polluted and you're running to the forest, do you think you're going to be a different person in the forest? No. So the difference between Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya, actually our scriptures tell us we should practice Yukta Vairagya. Falgu Vairagya means you are artificially rejecting something, thinking that rejecting it alone is going to make you a better person. Yukta Vairagya means we don't reject anything. So for example, there are some jnanis who will say, this phone, this device is a devil in disguise. You should throw away this device because it can distract you from the path of self-realization. You should get rid of the laptop. It can distract you from the path of liberation. Yukta Vairagya means I will use my intelligence to use this device to practice Bhakti Yoga. Anything and everything that is available to us in society, if we can use it for the purposes of self-realization, that is true renunciation. So artificially, if I reject this phone, what's going to happen? But can I not use this phone to send messages on Krishna consciousness? Can I not use my laptop to propagate Krishna consciousness? Which is better? Rejecting the laptop and phone and disappearing into the forest? Or can I use my laptop and phone and try to rescue those who are suffering here? Which is better? Krishna says Yukta Vairagya is far superior. So use your intelligence to understand how to use things that Krishna has given you to serve Krishna. Okay, one way of serving Krishna, maybe if you're prepared to go to the forest and do your deep meditation or study the scriptures or whatever. Another way to serve Krishna is to be in this material jungle and still learn how to serve Krishna. That is true renunciation. That is real renunciation. Just because you change your clothes doesn't make you a sannyasi. Krishna will tell in the Bhagavad Gita, a grahastha can be a sannyasi. How can a grahastha be a sannyasi? A grahastha can practice yukta vairagya and be even better and higher than a sannyasi who has given up everything. Because imagine how difficult it is to be renounced when you're surrounded by temptations. So real self-control comes when you're surrounded in this material world by all kinds of temptations, and still you can stay strong and determined in your practice of spirituality. Can you imagine how difficult that is to accomplish? And Krishna says such people who do this, oh, they are the topmost. They are better than sannyasis because they have used their intelligence to learn how to serve me, knowing fully well that they are surrounded by temptations. But they don't succumb to temptations. Why? Because they have learned to regulate their life. How does one regulate one's life? We'll come to those slides. So Krishna is saying in Shloka 6, Karmendriyani sanyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityacharasa uchyate. Krishna is saying, telling Arjuna, he who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So Krishna is saying, you may run into the forest, Arjuna, but you are not prepared to live in the forest as a renunciate. Therefore, you're going into the forest, you are going to simply be pretending. Pretending to be a sannyasi, pretending to be a brahmana all of a sudden. Krishna says, you are fooling yourself. This is false renunciation. When you think you're ready to give up your family because you've discovered something beautiful like bhakti yoga, that's a warning for us also. Not to be premature in making decisions. So some amount of maturity is required before you realize that maybe this material world is not for you. But this is not for everybody. There are very, very few people who are capable of giving up everything and actually practicing renunciation. So the entire Bhagavad Gita is not about leaving your family. It's not about leaving your job. It's not about leaving your desires. It's actually about living, learning how to live. So our movement is not the art of leaving. It is about the art of living. Actually, we will contradict ourselves in one of the future classes, but we will explain the difference. When Krishna talks about death in chapter 8, we are going to talk about the art of leaving. The art of leaving one's body in proper consciousness so that you don't have to take birth again. So what is real renunciation? Yajñarthat karma nonyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. So now Krishna is going to focus on work. Krishna says work is actually real renunciation. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. So Krishna is saying, if we work, who should we be working for? We should be working for Vishnu. We should not even be working for ourselves. So Krishna is for the first time introducing the fact that any duties and responsibilities that we perform, we are performing it to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So if we do our duties and responsibilities, the Supreme Lord is very satisfied with us. So anything that we can do to satisfy Lord Krishna, there is no karmic reactions. So if Arjuna is ready to follow Krishna's instructions and his advice, there is no reactions for it. Therefore, even if he kills 60 crore people on the battlefield, he does not have to worry about it. There are no consequences, negative consequences for that killing, because he's doing it to please the Supreme Lord. So you see how work is so important to Krishna. There's nowhere in the Bhagavad Gita where the Lord says, give up everything and run to the forest. Nowhere. You'll never hear Lord Krishna say this. He never encourages you to become a sannyasi, because it's not meant for everybody. The vast majority of us have to learn to live a sane life surrounded by chaos. We are living in a chaotic world. How do you maintain your sanity in this chaotic world is the answer that you're going to get in today's chapter. So we come to regulated activity. So Krishna is going to say, I'm asking you to perform your duties for the pleasure of Vishnu, which means you have to follow the Vedic scriptures. So here Krishna is telling Arjuna, Yajna Shishtashinas Santo Muchyante Sarvakil Vishaihi Bhunjate Te Tvagam Papa Ye Pachantyatma Karanat. The devotees of the Lord. Who are the devotees of the Lord? Those who are working for Vishnu are considered by the Lord to be devotees of the Lord. So understand, the Lord himself is giving a definition of who he considers to be devotees. Anyone working to please Lord Vishnu is considered a devotee. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So one example Krishna is giving here of how you can regulate your activity. We all have to eat to sustain our body. And Krishna is giving us one instruction here. Whatever you prepare, he's saying, offer it to me first, and then take it as prasadam. But if you prepare something and do not offer to me, whatever you eat, Krishna says, you're only eating sin. First instruction for us to follow. Every day when we cook, whoever is doing the cooking in the kitchen, we should be cooking for Vishnu. And then very nicely offer it on a plate with tulsi leaves, offer it to the Lord, and then accept it as prasad. If you do this, Krishna says there is no sin. Krishna is saying, my devotees are very intelligent, you know. Krishna always says his devotees are intelligent. Others may think we are dumb. But in Krishna's eyes, his devotees are very intelligent. They figured out all the tricks. Krishna is giving so many instructions, and they figured out, if I follow Krishna's instructions, I'm protected. If I don't follow Krishna's instructions, I'm in big trouble. So So Krishna is instructing the devotees. What do? Whatever they prepare, they offer it to me first. Because everything is a sacrifice. Every activity that we perform becomes a sacrifice if we do it to please Lord Vishnu. So like this, Krishna is going to talk about how we can regulate ourselves. He's talked about food. Later on, in much later chapters, he's going to talk about what kind of charity, what kind of sacrifice, what kind of yajna you should do that will please him. So we said that Krishna is going to talk about the yoga ladder. So Arjuna is thinking Jnana Yoga is a separate path, Karma Yoga, Karma Kanda, all separate paths. What Arjuna has not recognized that all of these yoga paths is just simply like a ladder, one step, one step, one step and higher. But we all have to begin somewhere on this ladder. So we're climbing up towards perfection. So what is the bottom rung of that ladder? Is called Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda means you're following prescribed duties and responsibilities as per the Vedas, but you're doing it because you want wealth or whatever it is that you want. But you're doing it within the boundaries of the Vedic scriptures. You're not doing it outside the boundaries. So this is Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda means you're chasing things, but you're chasing things in the right way. You're chasing things by following the scriptures. But then there is a problem there. We'll come to that problem in a minute. Sakama Karma Yoga is you're attached to doing your duties and responsibilities, but you're very much interested in the outcome. So success matters to you. So you will only follow the scriptures as long as you're guaranteed that success. Whereas in Karma Kanda, you may or may not always follow the scriptures. Fundamentally, you're interested in satisfying your desires. So do Nishkama Karma Yoga, whereas there is no profit and loss calculation here. In Nishkama Karma Yoga, you become attached to your duty, but you're not worried about the outcome. So in Nishkama Karma Yoga, your attitude is any work I'm ready to do. Any work you give me, I'm ready to do. I'm not worried about the outcome. I'm not worried about whether I'm going to get a positive result, a negative result. I'm just attached to doing my duty. So for example, some of the devotees will come to the temple because they like to clean. Some devotees like to preach. Some devotees like to make garlands for the Lord. Some devotees like to cook. So we all have to figure out how are we going to use the individual talents that Krishna has given us back in his service. So you become attached to that particular seva because you want to please Krishna by performing that seva. So cleaning the temple pleases Krishna. Cooking for Krishna pleases Krishna. Making garlands for Krishna pleases Krishna. Making beautiful outfits for Sri Radha Krishna pleases Krishna. Making nice jewelry for Krishna pleases Krishna. So each of us, Krishna is saying, we just simply have to figure out how do we use our intelligence and talent given to us back in his service. This really pleases the Supreme Lord. He says, oh, how nice, my child is doing everything to please me. How can I not protect him? He's already conquered my heart. Right? That's an example of that good child that we talked about, an obedient child. And then there is a section where the Lord talks about if you are in leadership roles, how you should conduct yourself. So here he is telling Arjuna, yad yad acharate shreshta tad tad evetaro janah sayat pramanam kurute lokas tadanu vartate. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, whatever action a great man performs, common men will follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Which means, first of all, if Arjuna runs away from the battlefield, other men will also think, I can also abscond from doing my duty. So by doing that, Arjuna would have established a new standard. I don't know whether you can really call it a standard, a degradation of standards. So Krishna is saying, if you're in a leadership position, you have to set very high standards for yourself. Why? Because seeing you, everybody else will follow in your footsteps. So everybody is in a leadership role. It's not just Arjuna. You are in a leadership role. I'm in a leadership role. If you're a parent, you're in a leadership role. If you're at work, you're performing some kind of role that has certain responsibilities. So each one of us, Krishna says, must perform our duty and responsibility because somebody else is observing us all the time. If we don't do our duty and responsibility, we are also misleading others. So that means we all have to accept that personal responsibility of what it means if we don't do something. And parents, of course, play a predominant role here. I'm sure a lot of you have children. How are you conducting yourself at home? We talked yesterday about how do you choose a guru? How do you identify a bona fide teacher? But to become a bona fide teacher, you first have to become an exemplary student, isn't it? So unless you are an exemplary student, how can you hope to become a leader or a teacher? So Krishna is saying, yes, follow the prescribed duties in the Vedic scriptures, regulate your life. Do the things that's going to prevent you from accumulating karma. And in that process, Krishna will say, you are trying to be a Brahmana. You may pretend to be a perfect Brahmana, but I would rather that you be an imperfect Kshatriya than be a perfect Brahmana, because you are not qualified yourself to become a Brahmana. So Krishna is saying, if you have a certain set of qualities and certain inclinations, you have to stick to those qualities and inclinations. You cannot just artificially give it up because the situation on the ground is uncomfortable for you. So Krishna will actually tell Arjuna, I prefer it when people stick to their Varna Ashrama and perform their duties and responsibilities, even though they may not be doing it perfectly. I prefer that than to those who pretend to be in a different Varna and a different Ashrama. And they may be performing that particular ashram's duties very perfectly, but I don't condone such activity. So understanding your natural tendencies and doing your duties and responsibilities according to that is more important to Krishna than to pretend to do somebody else's work perfectly. So if you've not qualified yourself to be a Brahmana, but externally you're pretending to be a perfect Brahmana, Krishna says, no, I prefer that you be a Kshatriya, and even if you're not a perfect Kshatriya, I'm okay with it. So this then leads to Arjuna's question. Why is it we do the wrong thing sometimes? So the question Arjuna is asking, even though I know the best course of action, But what is it that impels me to act improperly and against my good intelligence? And in response to that, Krishna talks about lust. He says, your enemy, and he says, your eternal enemy is lust. So in this particular shloka in 37, Lord Krishna is saying, Kama esha krodha esha rajo gunasamudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidyenam iha vairinam. The Lord is saying, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So lust is born of Rajogun. If you have Rajogun, then you will chase things. I want this, I want that. If you're in Tamogun, you're just asleep most of the time. You're in ignorance. But when you're chasing things and you're under the influence of Rajogun, that's where lust develops. So Krishna is saying, Rajogun, lust comes into contact with Rajogun and then it kind of flares up. It becomes like a burning fire. And when that lust is not satisfied, as we discovered yesterday, it turns to anger. Krishna uses some more analogies here. He is essentially talking about different degrees of lust. So Krishna uses an analogy. Lust is like a mirror covered by dust. If you wipe away the dust, you can see yourself clearly. But as long as that dust is covering the mirror, you cannot see yourself properly. So you're under some kind of illusion. Then a higher degree of lust is fire that is covered by smoke, where the smoke is so much you cannot even see the fire. Whereas when the mirror is covered by dust, you can still see the mirror. You may not be able to see yourself, but you recognize that mirror. But when there is such thick smoke, it obscures the fire itself. And then the highest or the most difficult kind of lust, for that the analogy the Lord uses is an embryo within the womb. An embryo within the womb cannot move. It's tightly restricted. So this mirror covered by dust is like human beings. The fire covered by smoke is like animals. And the embryo covered in the womb is like your non-moving living entities like trees. Different degrees of lust that cause you to occupy different types of body. And as we discovered, the wardrobe is 8.4 million different clothes that we can take up. And how is lust? It's like when you have an itch and you scratch it, the itch becomes worse. So avritam jnana etena jnanino nitya vairina kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. The Lord is saying, thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So this is how the Atma gets covered. The consciousness gets contaminated. So Krishna is talking really about how your consciousness is getting contaminated. The more lust you have, the thicker that layer of contamination. And this lust, Krishna says, as long as you satisfy even one lust, it will give birth to another lust and another lust and another lust, and it goes on like this. So this is why it's like a burning fire. Krishna is using the analogy of a fire that is just raging in us. Our lust is endless. Our desires are endless. So now Krishna is going to give the solution. Okay, so we have lust. We know it is difficult to deal with lust and desires because it's there. It's natural. It's there, but we have to figure out how to deal with it. So Krishna is going to say how to defeat this enemy, lust. He's called it the eternal enemy, which means we should always be on the lookout. We should never think, oh, I've conquered this enemy. The minute you think you've conquered lust, it's going to rear up its ugly head and confound you and bewilder you. Where does this lust reside? Krishna is saying, this lust is hiding in 3 different places. It's hiding in your senses, it's hiding in your mind, it's hiding in your intelligence. So your enemy has occupied these 3 places: your senses, your mind, and intelligence. First, understand these are the 3 hiding places for lust. Okay, now you found the hiding place, how are you going to defeat them? So in Shloka 40, Krishna is saying, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So now that we found out the hiding place, how do you defeat the enemy? Krishna will come back to regulating everything. You have to regulate the senses, you have to regulate the mind, you have to regulate the intelligence. Of the 3, which is easy to control or easier to control? The senses. Mind is very difficult to control. Later on in chapter 6, Arjuna will complain to Arjuna, you're asking me to control my mind. Are you mad? I can't control my mind. I'm not a yogi. So we have to begin with the senses. So what are our 5 senses? As we said, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, and your touch. So how do you regulate your senses? Your eyes should be taking darshan of the Lord. Your eyes should be on the scriptures, reading the scriptures. Your ears should be hearing Krishna Katha or the Bhagavad Gita. Your nose should be smelling what has been offered to the Lord at the lotus feet of the Lord. Your mouth should only be tasting what has been offered to the Lord. Your mouth should, as much as possible, be reciting the Bhagavad Gita, be memorizing the Bhagavad Gita shlokas, chanting the holy names of the Lord. So this is how you regulate the senses. What about touch? How do you regulate your sense of touch? We come in proximity with other Vaishnavas. We exchange loving relations with other Vaishnavas. So your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, your sense of touch, all should be regulated in doing spiritual activities. So the more your senses are exposed to these spiritual activities, the more the dust from the mirror is getting cleansed. You don't know how it is getting cleansed, but it is getting cleansed. Right? So battle plan 2 is to actually act now. Act on how you want to clean your consciousness. And it begins with the senses. Okay, so now you've covered the 5 senses. What do we do about the mind and intelligence? You have to expose it to the right knowledge. Shastra. So we strengthen our mind and intelligence by chanting, hearing, reading, discussing, and applying this knowledge in our personal lives. So if we've been talking about chanting and the importance of chanting, then the right thing to do is to start to chant every day for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. As a matter of fact, tomorrow onwards, I would like you all to join 10 minutes early at 5:50. So we can all chant one round of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, 108 times. This is how you begin to regulate your senses, mind, and intelligence. So in ISKCON, we have a very simple formula, which we call the ABCD formula. A is for association. We need to spend time with other devotees who are following this path of Bhakti Yoga. If you associate with the right people, you'll pick up the right habits. If you associate with people who are materialistic, then you're going to pick up the habits that's with them. So association is important. There are two types of association. In today's world, we are doing digital association. But what is more important is physical association. We may not be able to go to the temple every day to associate with the temple, with the other devotees, because we have so many responsibilities. But we should make it a point to go to the temple at least every Sunday, spend a good 4 or 5 hours in the temple, sitting there with other devotees, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam class, doing some seva, honoring prasadam along with the devotees. Physical association with devotees is very important. Digital association is helpful, but physical association is most beneficial for you. What does the B stand for? Reading books. We should read the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. We should learn to chant the shlokas regularly. We should try to memorize the important shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita. Right now, we are teaching you how to recite chapter 6. We've finished 5 chapters. We've finished teaching everybody how to recite. So there are a lot of devotees who are waking up 5:30 in the morning and joining our classes just so that they can learn how to recite the Bhagavad Gita. So we've finished 5 chapters. Our goal, which we all took for ourselves as devotees, we said, next year during Janmashtami, we will all sit together in the temple and recite the 18 chapters together. It's going to take us 3 to 4 hours to recite, but we took that as a spiritual goal for ourselves. We want to learn how to recite the entire Bhagavad Gita. We may not be perfect in our recitation, but we have this spiritual desire. So there are around 30-35 devotees who are coming at 5:30 in the morning just to learn how to recite the Bhagavad Gita. And they stay back from 6 to 6:30 so we can all chant one round together and read one shloka of the Bhagavad Gita, understand the meaning, and our day is, we are ready to begin to work. We're ready to tackle this material jungle. So reading is important. C stands for chanting. This is the Yuga Dharma. The names of the Supreme Lord, the names of Hari should be chanted constantly. That's why the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra becomes so important. So 6 o'clock to 6:10, every day we chant in the other class that is going on parallelly. So I'm inviting you to join us at 5:50 tomorrow for the next, 18 days or 17 days. We can all come and chant together. I will teach you how to chant. I would love for you to purchase some beads from the temple. Next time you go to ISKCON, purchase a bead and a bead bag, and we will teach you how to chant tomorrow. D is your diet. D also includes deity worship. You have to watch what you eat. As much as possible, you should restrict your diet to Krishna Prasadam, which means whatever you're cooking it with love for Krishna, offering it to the Lord, and then honoring it as prasadam. Why? Because Krishna has said if we don't offer it to him, we are eating sin. Now, why would we deliberately want to disobey Krishna? We don't want to do that. We want to be obedient students of Krishna. We want to be obedient servants of Krishna. So if Krishna says, do not eat outside food, no matter how beautiful and tempting it looks, then we will not eat. Because Krishna loves us so much. He's saying, if you eat that outside food, Arey Baba, you're going to have to take that sin. Why do you want to do that? So I know this is very difficult to do in today's world where you are surrounded by restaurants and whatever, Swiggy this and Swiggy that, anything you can order from anywhere. So much prepared foods available when you go to the supermarket. As much as possible, we should learn to avoid eating foods that are mass produced in factories. It is not good for you at all. It's not good for you, meaning what? It's not good for you physically, it's not good for your consciousness. Krishna is very worried about how you are managing your consciousness. He doesn't want you to do anything that is going to disturb your consciousness. So being a devotee of Krishna means following the instructions of Krishna. In the beginning, it may not be easy to follow all these instructions. In the beginning, it's a big struggle to come to the temple, to come to the class, to chant the holy names of the Lord, to not be tempted to eating out. In the beginning, when I came to Krishna consciousness, who doesn't like eating out? I mean, who doesn't like eating pani puri on the corner of the street or vada pav, whatever it is, bel puri, whatever it is, who doesn't like eating pizza in a restaurant? In the beginning, it is difficult to give up these habits. But the more you practice and the more you chant, it becomes easy. And of course, along with this, one should also give up eating onion and garlic because Krishna does not accept foods with onion and garlic. So whatever you're preparing for Krishna, it should be without onion and garlic because they are tamasic. They're also rajasic. They activate your baser instincts. So now some people will argue, but then onion and garlic have medicinal benefits. Well, if it's a medicine, use it for some time. You are not going to be on medicine for the rest of your life. I hope not. If you genuinely need to consume garlic because it's medicinal value, there's got to be a start date and an end date, and then you're done. Ideally, we don't want to do that also, but sometimes we have to look for cures. Actually, onion, especially garlic, is very poisonous to your brain. It impacts your central nervous system. There are studies that have been done. Garlic may have other whatever benefits to the heart, but if your heart is healthy but your consciousness is short, what is the point of living? Your brains are decaying, what's the point? You're saving your heart and destroying your brain. That doesn't make sense. So we need to use intelligence to understand what types of food is the right food for our body. So you can remember the simple A, B, C, D formula that we follow in ISKCON. So I want to relay a few pastimes because I have not relayed any pastimes till now. And I also said I will describe karma in a little bit more detail. So I will talk about karma and then talk to you about pastimes, about how doing even a little bit of bhakti can protect you. So there is karma, there is akarma, and there is vikarma. That's what we learned, right? In Secrets of Gita. So I'm going to use a tank analogy, a water tank analogy, to explain to you how karma actually operates. Let us say you've had thousands of births, just 1,000. Actually, you've already had millions of births, but let's just assume you've been born 1,000 times. And in each birth, let's assume you've only had human births. Because karma applies to human life. Karma does not impact animals or whatever, birds, plants, etc. So every time you've lived a human life, you have engaged in activities, positive activities, negative activities. So inside that water tank, there is a pipe that's going to fill up that tank. So all of your activities that you perform is that inlet pipe. Some of the activities that you perform is good, some of the activities that you perform is not so good. So there are going to be positive consequences to what you do, and there are going to be negative impacts for some of your activities. Both the positive and negative is getting deposited in that tank. So the minute you take human birth, that water pipe is opened and the water is filling up the tank. So let us say you have died, you've taken a new birth. The tank is still there. The tank is not destroyed. Next birth, that water pipe, let's say you've taken another human birth. You're very fortunate, you've got another human body. Water pipe is open again. And you're filling up that tank. Positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Like this, the tank keeps filling. And the tank, as long as you keep taking births, the tank is also expanding. So there's more space and more space and more space for you to fill up the tank. So let us say you have died and you've taken a new body. What happens when you take a new body? Every tank has an inlet pipe and an outlet pipe. The inlet pipe is what you're depositing through your activities. Now you have an outlet pipe. How are you draining that tank? Because whatever you're depositing, you have to use it, right? You have to use it in the form of reactions, correct? So that's that outlet pipe from which the water is coming out. So that entire tank is called Sanchita Karma. Your sum total of what all you have deposited over many, many births. This is called Sanchita Karma. It's the water tank. That outlet pipe is what you withdraw when you take your next birth. If you get an animal body, you've withdrawn something that caused you to get that animal body. If you get a human body, you've withdrawn something that has caused you to get that human body. So every time you take birth, you're withdrawing a little bit of that water from that water tank, and you're experiencing that in this life. Both the good and the bad. So as long as you keep performing good activities, you have to take birth because you have to be rewarded for it. As long as you perform not so good activities, you have to take birth because you have to be punished for it. So both reward and punishment is there in that tank. And each time you take birth, you're withdrawing a little bit of reward, a little bit of punishment. What is the ratio of the two? Nobody knows. Only the Lord knows. So some of us are experiencing a wonderful life with very little punishment. Some of us are experiencing intense punishment, it seems, with very little rewards. So what is that ratio composition when you take birth that tells you whether you're going to suffer a lot or enjoy a lot, or is it going to be in equal balance? That we don't know. That the Lord decides. So every time you withdraw from this water tank when you take birth, that is called prarabdha karma. It means whatever you have deposited has ripened and you're ready to pluck it and eat it. So what you are experiencing in this life is called prarabdha karma. That karma has fructified and you're experiencing the results of it, both good and bad. The problem is that every time you take a human birth, you are also committing karma now, and you're depositing again into the water tank. So every time you get a human birth, you're depositing, you're experiencing, and simultaneously you're creating new karma. Constantly you're depositing. Imagine there is no break in this cycle. So how are you going to break the cycle? What's the trick? How are you going to shut off that outlet pipe? So Krishna is giving the answer in the Bhagavad Gita. How you actually shut off that pipe. The only way to shut off that pipe. It is only Krishna who can change your prarabdha karma. So let us say, astrologically, if you go to an astrologer may look at your horoscope and say, oh no, Mataji, you're going to suffer intensely. That's what the horoscope says. But Krishna says, if you become my devotee, that astrological chart doesn't matter, because I can change your prarabdha karma. Remember when we were reading Shankaracharya's verses? In one of the verses, what was Adi Shankaracharya Pad saying? That by Krishna's grace and mercy, our karmic reactions can get wiped out simply by bathing our intellect in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna, if he wishes, and if he is merciful on you, he can wipe out what's in that water tank. And he can also stop your prarabdha karma. So the only way to get rid of that water in that water tank is to become a devotee of Krishna. That's the only way. That's the only easy way. Let me amend my statement. So as long as you're constantly depositing, that is called agamya karma. So 3 types of karma. Sanchita karma is the water tank. Prarabdha karma is what you have opened the outlet pipe and you're filling it up. That's your this birth. And you're experiencing the consequences of this birth. Agamya karma is in this birth, you're freshly depositing water into that tank again. Which is why a devotee is interested in a karma. A karma means we don't want good reactions, we don't want bad reactions. We want to put a stop to both. And Krishna says the only way to put a stop to both is to become his devotee, is to take his shelter. So after hearing this, why would we not want to become devotees of Krishna? Because this is the only option we have. If we don't want to take birth again and go through this vicious cycle again and again and again, then in Krishna's minds, you and I are fools if we don't want to follow his instruction. So now what happens if you take on the body of an animal? Let us say in the next birth, you become a tiger. What happens to this water tank? Water tank is still there. That outlet pipe you've withdrawn and you've occupied the body of a tiger. But as long as you are in the body of the tiger, the inlet pipe is shut off. Because if you're occupying the body of a tiger, there is no more papa and punya for you. The tank still exists. The balance of the water is still in the tank, but as long as you're in the body of an animal, you are not depositing into that water tank. But the minute you take a human body, that inlet pipe is open. Therefore, Krishna says this human life is so precious. If we understood how precious this human life is, we will do everything to make sure that we avoid another birth. So essentially, you and I are deciding our future today. By all our activities today, you and I are deciding what birth we're going to take next time. If we're fortunate enough to be sincere devotees of Lord Krishna, then we don't have to worry about taking birth again. So the inlet pipe is your activities plus your desires. As said, as long as you have desires, unfulfilled desires, you keep carrying it from one birth to the next birth, you have to keep taking birth. That's why Krishna has talked about higher level of desires in chapter 2. We should have the right type of desires. The right type of desires is spiritual desires. But we can practice Yukta Vairagya, which means, coming back to that office analogy, if I have a nice job offer, so let's say I've applied for a job, they're going to pay me, say, 10 crores. Should I take the job or not? I can take that job. As long as I use the benefits of taking on that job to serve Krishna nicely and to serve his devotees nicely. So if making more money means using that money in preaching activities, do you think that's going to please Krishna? Of course, it's going to please Krishna very much. But if I make more money and I say, oh, this money is mine, let me use it to satisfy my senses, then that is not going to please Krishna very much. So even devotees aspire for better paying jobs because through the better paying job, they are able to propagate Krishna consciousness. So this is the way karma actually operates. So if you want liberation, you need to shut off that inlet pipe. And the outlet pipe will be open and be drained out. That will be drained out by Krishna. We don't have to worry about it. The inlet pipe has to be stopped, and that is stopped when we become devotees of Krishna. And simply saying I'm a devotee of Krishna is not enough. We need to follow Lord Krishna's instructions. We need to follow Acharya's instructions. We need to follow Shiksha Guru's instructions. So having the knowledge, this knowledge is not sufficient, but practicing this knowledge, that's the difference between jnana and vijnana. When Arjuna asks Krishna, how can I control this lust? Because lust is the enemy, as we've discovered. So really, we need to figure out how do we tackle this enemy? And Krishna says, yes, it's difficult to tackle lust, but you can do it with vairagya and abhyasa. Abhyasa means practice. So Krishna is saying, whatever I'm telling you, why don't you start practicing first? You practice first. And as you keep practicing, you will develop detachment. So the vairagya will come over a period of practice. So I can be a wildly successful businessman and not be performing any papa or punya because I'm wildly successful to please Lord Vishnu. So I can decide tomorrow I want to open up a new business, but I will use that business to propagate Krishna consciousness. It can be a profitable business, but I'm going to use that profit to do annadan. I'm going to use that profit to help construct a temple. I'm going to use that profit to print books. I'm going to use that profit to hold programs in different places. So this is a wise use of one's talents and abilities in the service of Krishna. So as I promised, a couple of pastimes. So there was this, to talk about this prarabdha karma and how it can be changed. There was this very wonderful Brahmana. His name was Prasiddha. So his guru, Vashishta Muni, gives him the duty of protecting the cows. That was his only job, to protect the cows. He was following the path of Jnana Yoga. One night there is a severe thunderstorm, and the cows are out in the open. There is no shed. And because it is his job to protect the cows, he decides to hold a sword and stand outside in the thunder and lightning and rainstorm. And when he sees the lightning strike across, he sees a tiger in the dark. And he knows that the tiger is about to attack or take up one of the cows or calves as its meal. So he's there standing with his sword to protect the cows because that's the instructions he's got from his guru. That's his duty. So he wants to kill the tiger, but in the darkness, he ends up killing the cow instead of the tiger. He misses. So instead of killing the tiger, he ends up killing the cow. Go Hatya is considered to be a horrible sin in Vedic culture. Cows should not be killed. Women should not be killed. Children should not be killed. Brahmanas should not be killed. Elderly people should not be killed. So in our culture, these are the 6 protected class. They should always be protected. Cows should always be protected. Women should always be protected. Children should always be protected. Brahmanas should always be protected. Elderly people should always be protected. This is there in our scriptures. That's why cow protection is so important in our culture, because it is directly related to the protection of dharma, actually. But anyway, this Brahmana ends up killing the cow instead of the tiger. So when his guru discovers that he's killed the cow and not the tiger, he gets extremely upset and he curses him. And what is the curse that Vashishta Muni gives him? May you be a Shudra with no knowledge of Vedic culture. When he hears the sharp, this Brahmana immediately leaves the Gurukul and he decides to practice Bhakti Yoga. And very successfully, even though his guru had cursed him, he achieves liberation simply by practicing Bhakti Yoga. So his prarabdha karma was absolutely changed, even though the guru had cursed him. The curse was completely dissipated by his practice of Bhakti Yoga. So this is one pastime. There is also another pastime about our productivity. When we work, are we really working? When we chant, are we really chanting? When we attend class, are we really attending class? Are we listening? Or are we doing other things, multitasking sometimes? So one day, Agastya Muni, he wants to build a temple for Krishna in Kalahasti. And, being a great Muni, a Rishi, he gets a lot of people to help him build the temple. But then he has no money. How is he going to award the people who helped him construct this beautiful temple for Krishna? So at that time, Agastya Muni calls Bharadwaj Rishi and Vashishta Muni and asks them, can you reward all these workers who have worked tirelessly to build this temple, because I don't have the money to reward them. They have helped me build this beautiful temple for Lord Krishna, and we need to reward them. So what do? The two rishis, Vashishta Muni and Bharadwaj Muni, they are both Raja rishis. They're well versed in the scriptures. So they ask all the workers to line up, stand in a line, and extend your palm like this. So one by one, the workers come in front of the two rishis and with their cupped palm like this. And the rishis pour sand into their palm. So as the sand hits the palm, it would turn into gold. So for some of the workers, their palms was filled with gold. But for some of the workers, the sand remained sand. Why? Based on their sincerity, productivity. So Bhakti Yoga is also like that. The more sincere you are in performing Bhakti Yoga, the more powerful the result. So I can be chanting, you can be chanting. Externally, you are chanting, I am also chanting. But the person who is chanting with absolute sincerity will feel and experience the benefit versus the person who is chanting mechanically. So even in bhakti, Krishna's calculation is your sincerity. It doesn't mean that if you're not chanting with sincerity, there is no benefit. There is some benefit, definitely. But only time will tell how effective our chanting is, because you will experience the results. So if your chanting is sincere, and every seva that you undertake for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu is done with sincerity, you will experience it, the results in your life. In chapter 3, Krishna talks about great Mahajans. He's telling Arjuna, if you want to follow in the footsteps, you should follow in the footsteps of great Mahajans. And in Shloka 20 or 24, I think, in the 3rd chapter, the Lord gives example of Janaka Maharaj, the father of Sri Sita Devi. In Shloka 20, Krishna says, kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. So Krishna is telling there are many, many great examples. You don't have to only follow the rishis. You can also follow other kings. Actually, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yamaraj in Canto 6, he talks about the 12 Mahajans. And the shloka goes as follows. Swayambho Narada Shambho Kumara Kapilo Manuhu Prahalado Janako Bhishmo Bhalir Vaiyasakir Vayam. So Yamaraj, when he's talking to the Yamadutas, this is in the context of the Ajamil pastime. He's telling them there are 12 personalities that we can follow in their footsteps. Who are they? Swayambhu. Swayambhu is Lord Brahma. Narada, which is Narada Rishi. Shambho, Lord Shiva. Kumara, the 4 Kumaras. Kapilo, Lord Kapila, the son of Devahuti. Manuhu, Swayambhu Manu. Prahalada, Prahlad Maharaj, we can follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj. And he mentions Janaka. So Janaka is another personality that we can follow. Then he mentions Bhishma, grandfather Bhishma. Bali, Bali Maharaj. Vaiyasaki, Vaiyasaki, the son of Vyasadeva is called Vaiyasaki, Shukadev Goswami, the person who's reciting the Bhagavatam. And he says, Vaiyasakir Vayam. Vayam, he is including himself. So Yamaraj is also one of the 12 Mahajans. So these are the 12 personalities who are considered to be perfect in how they perform their duties and responsibilities and how they adhere to religious principles. Brahma, Narada, Shiva, Kumara, Kapila Muni, Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, and Yamaraj himself. So in that context, in this chapter 3, Lord Krishna gives the example of Janaka Maharaj. After giving the example of Janaka Maharaj, Krishna gives himself as an example. He says, well, can't you see me? I am the Supreme Lord, but do you not see me performing my duties and responsibilities? If Krishna wanted, he could have killed everybody with a chakra on the battlefield. Why does he need Arjuna? Why does he need Yudhishthira? Why does he need Nakula and Sahadev and Bhima? Krishna is quite capable of killing all these people on the battlefield with just his chakra. But he wanted to impart the importance of performing one's duties and responsibilities. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, haven't you observed? Even I am performing my duty and responsibility, although I don't have any duty and responsibility, Arjuna. So that's the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita and how duties, just performing your duty with sincerity, and especially if you add Lord Krishna into the picture, where you are doing everything to please and satisfy Lord Vishnu, then your life is sublime. So this is Karma Yoga. The single word summary today is duty. We'll look at the summary slide and then we will close the session. Yeah. The acronym was TREE. The difference between Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. We have to become detached from the mentality of ownership. This is mine, that is mine, that is mine, etc. Rather, our mood should be, we want to please Lord Vishnu. Regulated activities, there are those who are sinful, who are only interested in enjoying themselves. They don't care about Shastras. Then there are those people who are sinless and godless. They are following the Vedic scriptures and they're doing it in such a nice way that they don't accumulate any sin. Then you have those who are just ritualistic. They perform all these rituals. I will light so many lamps. I will do this. I will do that. I will do that. You will have a lot of family members who are very busy doing a lot of rituals. But they are accumulating karmic reactions for that. And then you have the karma yogis, the nishkama karma yogi, who is attached to his duty but not to the results. And then Krishna talks about exemplary leadership, examples of Janaka Maharaj and himself, and of course, other great kings. And then in response to Arjuna's question about why do we feel compelled to act in ways that are detrimental to ourselves, Krishna talks about lust and where to find this lust and how to conquer that lust through practice and detachment. So we'll stop here. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.